Hello and welcome to PolyInnovator. This episode of the Poly content is basically around the PolyCast itself, which is the third arm of the Poly content series. So you have the written blog post, the video that you're watching right now, and the audio that you're listening in on. And so whenever it comes to the PolyCast, I have really taken this multifaceted polymathic approach, hence the word poly in the PolyCast. And so there's some other particular polycasts out there that use the kind of the same name. Honestly, I respect it because it's kind of a cool name. I actually chose it in the sense of avoiding the word podcast like the plague, because it originated from the iPod. But eventually I got over that for some SEO reasons. And so but I was really going double down on the polycast being the name of the content type instead of audiocast or instead of podcast, polycast, because it meant more. Poly meaning much or many. I had much or many series and different topics as well. And so it's one of those things where it was very important to me to have this distinction. But eventually the podcast kind of won out just for the sense of just being able to be able to find it. But the polycast, the polymath of podcasts is what we're talking about today. Roll the intro. P.S. It's a new intro. Welcome back. And so in this episode, I'm going to be going over the thought process behind why it's called the Polymath Polycast. So what do you get when you combine a podcast with somebody who can't decide on a niche? And so there's actually a lot of reasons why you would niche down for creating content, but I actually had this idea of creating content about many different topics over the course of time. And I wanted to have a podcast channel based around that. And so sure, the Fireside micro polycast might be just me kind of ranting some ideas or sharing ideas, but the actual main polycast series, we're going to be something along those lines where I'm just actually going more in depth on that Fireside concept. The polycast episodes don't really happen very often. What do happen are these poly content episodes that you are listening and watching on, like I said, or the interviews, which will come up here soon. Now, over the course of the past few years, I've been striving to get this series to be much more consistent, this content type to be more consistent. And so today, I just want to introduce myself and get into the topic. I am Dustin Miller, PolyInnovator. Thank you for watching and listening. Let's get down to it. So each one of these different topics that go underneath the PolyInnovator umbrella. PolyInnovator, really kind of the main niche or anti-niche, meta-niche, whatever you want to call it, is around polymathy, being someone who is multidisciplinary deeply in many different fields, at least 3 or more. And so every sub-niche, the modular degree, PolyInnovator gaming, the swimming, content, whatever the sub-niche I'm talking about, those all still fall underneath that umbrella. Since the polycast is just the audio arm of that umbrella, all that kind of content goes funneled into there too. And so I'm taking this octopus-like polymathic approach to the content that I'm already making, as well as that also includes the audio form. And so whenever I am sitting here creating content or recording videos, ironically, I have a lot of issues when it comes to audio. My microphone, for some reason, doesn't like to be picked up by OBS sometimes, or even Bandicam. And so I have to always test it out because honestly, audio is way more important. You can see my hand gestures in the video, you can see my expressions, but you're still listening in. You could put this on, open up a new tab, and still get the idea of what's going on because audio is that important. If you're listening in, that's why I try to make my episodes very auditorily descriptive so that way you can understand what I am doing. So right now, I'm enhancing my hands to really show you what that intensity feels like. So that way you can hear it while you're listening in. So ironically, doing this multi-niche approach is actually not counterintuitive like you might think. A lot of podcasters make the mistake of choosing just one niche. They don't treat it as if it's their baby, it's their content. So if you were to be a YouTuber, for example, you might try out many different things at first. In fact, that's what the kind of first 100 videos are about, to really try out different styles, different content types, different content media topics in general, so that way you understand what you like the most. And so whenever you start experimenting and exploring, that's how you get to know what really resonates with you and your audience. And then on top of that, who knows, maybe you don't want to niche down. Maybe you're the anti-niche person like me. And I think that's actually becoming more of a trend nowadays too. And so by spreading yourself out, you actually keep things more engaging, not only for you, but for your audience. You're keeping it fresh. And that's what's key. A lot of podcasters quit after the first or second season. Oh my goodness, you should have seen 2020 and 2021. There was so many podcasters that came out of the woodwork during quarantine and then just fell off the radar once it ended. And so that was one of those things where I was like, rest in peace. But it's one of those things, you have to keep it going. And so right now I'm up to 220 episodes of the podcast. That's crazy to me. Now, it isn't always the best thing. Some people are going to come on here and they're not going to expect. I have multiple series. They're like, what does all this mean? And I try to explain it. I've created tons of content explaining what these different series are, why I do it. This is one of those content episodes too, explaining it once again. And that's really the point, though, is by having all these different series, I get to cover so many different bases. So the Fireside micro polycast may be short, 3 to 9 minutes long, but it helps because there's going to be some people who only want to hear from me for a few minutes and then move on. They're like, okay, I want to see what's new or what's he talking about right now, that kind of thing. And I use the Fireside kind of concept to be a little bit more relaxed, not as strict with the topics or the content quality. I just go in, I make it, and I'm done. And because of that, I can make them more frequently. They can fill in gaps on the podcast schedule if I need to fill in maybe an episode here or there. They also give me a chance to share certain ideas and get it off my mind. And that way I can focus on the topics at hand. So if there's something that I really need to make, but there's something that's really just bouncing around in my head that I can't get out, then I can use this Fireside chat in order to get that out, clear my mind, and focus on the other content that I need to make as well. Then you have the main polycast, like I mentioned earlier. It's usually around 25 to 40 minutes. It just depends. Sometimes I make my finales or starts of the seasons a polycast, and the first 2 episodes are the polycast episodes too. And these are one of those things where I'm actually treating that more like a specialty, like a rare treat, whereas instead of being the main thing, which is kind of ironic because most people would probably do the opposite. And then I have the PolyCast multidisciplinary interviews where I talk to people who are doing many different things. They have one specialty in this area, one specialty in this area, maybe a couple hobbies, and they all mix together to become that person. And so I get to highlight all those different things. As well as the secondary interview series, the Round 2 PolyCast, where it's a much more quicker, 30 minutes on average length, so that way people can actually get a chance to see what's going on in those people's lives that we previously interviewed. And then beyond that, who knows? I might have more series down the line, including around 3 polycasts, but it's one of those things where I don't necessarily know how I'm going to do that just yet. In the end, this is the Polymath of PolyCast. There's multiple series. I try to go deep into each one and give them all tons of content in those series as well, so none of them are that underwhelming. And honestly, I just wanted to share with people that you can do more than just one series in one channel of podcast. So if you go on Spotify, you're going to see just one series usually, maybe 2, but generally they're not necessarily super consistent about that, or they don't necessarily have a plan with that. What I highly suggest is having one long form and one short form, and that way you can basically get at least most people covered. Now, having a medium length is actually ideal. I don't know if it's changed since then, but the average podcast length was 22 minutes long. That was like the average that people like to listen for. And so I try to cater for that for the main polycast and the poly content episodes. This episode's actually only about 9 minutes long, so it's actually pretty short, but I didn't have as many things to talk about in this episode today. I just wanted to get this season started. I'm super excited to get all this different stuff out, and I hope you are too. See ya.
Dustin Miller, PolyInnovator.